here we are with another episode of the Final Fantasy Platinum series. That is right, we have completed another Final Fantasy and got the Platinum trophy. And, you know, it has been quite the journey. This is my 10th mainline Final Fantasy that I've platinumed this year alone. And I just want to thank you guys that have been watching every episode. If this is your first time here, please go check out the playlist and go through all of the Final Fantasies and hear my thoughts and opinions on all of them. Essentially, that's what it is. I'm going to talk about my latest experience with the game, a past experience with the game when I first played it, talk about the trophy list and everything else in between. So with that all being said, what is up guys, Jen here, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. As always, I've got you covered with timestamps in the description down below, so if there's a certain section you want to skip to, feel free. Whatever floats your boat, all I ask is for you to support the channel and hit the thumbs up button. So let's get straight into Final Fantasy X. And again, I want to plug myself just ever so slightly. I streamed some of this journey, and again, I want to shout out everyone that joined me for this because it always enhances that experience, and I like to kind of share that peek behind the curtain. So I do urge you, go in the links below and follow me so you know when I am live streaming anything, either it be Final Fantasy or something else. But it was a very fun time streaming Final Fantasy X. Moving on swiftly, I want to talk about my history with Final Fantasy X. I'll try and keep it brief, but I will just kind of say it how it is. So I got the PlayStation 2. I think my first games I got for the PlayStation 2 was Way Hey Crazy Taxi, and I think it might have been Gran Turismo 3. But I was waiting for Final Fantasy X, and I got it the Christmas it came out. I can't remember specifically, but I remember getting it for Christmas. And I was all in. I was amazed because we had voice acting for the very first time, even though they took a few things away. And, you know, I was looking into it and I was thinking, this is not Final Fantasy. Where's my overworld? Where's my very big model and the very small houses? Why am I traversing through a menu to an airship? I was a bit salty about a few things, but I think the more I played it and I played it and I played it and I played it, it slowly became one of my favorite Final Fantasies. I played this very early on in my years of being a teen, so I was discovering all of these emotions left, right, and center, and Final Fantasy X hit. And it was a really, really good time back on the PlayStation 2. So how did Final Fantasy X evolve the series? Well, just mentioned there with my history is that we were moving over to a new system, new hardware, more powerful hardware, and its ability to do more things. We moved on from pre-rendered backgrounds, even though Final Fantasy X did still have some pre-rendered backgrounds here and there, and they were very nice, by the way. They really came out well in the HD edition, but we had very much 3D maps across the board, which kind of made you more immersed in this. We could swim, we could go through various kind of biomes in Final Fantasy X. It introduced voice acting, which was the most important part. No more reading text boxes, it was just listening and getting invested in the story. And you know, that can be quite a hard transition for some people to do. Some people love just reading the text and going at their own pace as opposed to just waiting through dialogue that's being spoke. But that was one vital thing that did change for Final Fantasy going forward. Now we'll go into a little bit more detail a little bit later in the video, but combat also evolved. We got something called, I think, the conditional battle system here, and it was very in-depth and very kind of engaging, and just some people may say this was the last kind of like traditional battle system for Final Fantasy, but it was here in Final Fantasy X. Right, let's get into the nitty-gritty and let's start off with the story of Final Fantasy X. There's probably going to be spoilers, so if you look at the description down below, go to the next section that might skip story and characters and look at the gameplay, because we're going to be going into some things, because Final Fantasy X is quite the experience. I think, again, voice acting added a lot to the story of Final Fantasy X, allowing you to kind of watch it like a movie. Not only that, but we had cutscenes as opposed to just dialogue boxes all over the charts. We had like uses of camera angles and panning, Like the intro scene in particular, when it's like, this is my story. Just the way it spans around Zanarkand, the weapons in the middle, and just the overall camera work really sets the scene, and this carries on throughout the story of Final Fantasy X. I really do like the story of Final Fantasy X because it puts us in the shoes of Tidus, and we get to kind of live it how he does. We are thrown into this world that we know nothing about. Tidus also knows nothing about this world, so we are going through and experiencing everything firsthand through his eyes and our eyes, and getting all the lore that we can through the characters that we meet. So let's move on to the cast of characters of Final Fantasy X. We of course have Tidus in this game. He is our main character, and Tidus, you know, he is quite the character. He's quite the main character. I think a bit of a goofball would be one way to kind of, you know, sum him up, but he definitely is a strong protagonist in Final Fantasy. We have other characters like Yuna, we have Wakka, Lulu, Komari, Auron, Riku, and they really do add to the dynamic, and they all have backstories that really kind of intertwine along the way, and it's really good. Like Wakka's hatred for the Elbed, but then we have Riku, who is the cousin of Yuna, and just that conflict and how it evolves throughout the story. Auron being very mysterious as we go through the game, and then we find out, even though we get hints throughout the game, that he is unsent, and the way that the party deals with that. The fact that when we hit the main crux of this game, when we find out that Tidus is a dream of the faith, and he is going to be disappearing once the dreaming is over, once we've defeated Sin. It's an all-stakes story and very emotional, and the characters really add to that. Again, with all Final Fantasies, you have your strong main cast, but we do have our set of side characters, and our main antagonist of the game being Seymour. You know, he is one of the better ones. He does indeed have some kick-ass battle music, and he does have those moments where you go, you motherfucker, when he really kind of destroys what's going on around him and his true intentions in Final Fantasy X. It really gets the gears kind of going. We have other side characters that we meet along the way, and we lose characters along the way as well, and they just add to the overall story. Now, before I move on, I just want to talk about the ending of Final Fantasy. This will have its own timestamp, so you can skip it accordingly. But I truly think that Final Fantasy X has one of the best endings of a Final Fantasy. Now, I don't know if it's because of where it hit me in my lifetime. Again, I was early into my teens. I was discovering these emotions for the first time. This was the first game that I was playing with voice dialogue and cutscenes and the way it was telling its story. So maybe that has something to do with it, and that's why it's always embedded in my mind. But playing it again and witnessing that ending, I get goosebumps and I get teary-eyed every time. It's such an emotional ending for me, and I just really think it just tells the story and ends it on a good note, and I'm so glad that it stopped there, because Final Fantasy X has a great story, and its ending really adds to that. The world of Final Fantasy X. Spira. We play as Tidus, and we're going through this world, and this world is vast. Now, we don't have an overworld, and some people may think that it's linear, and it is. You are going from A to B, but you can backtrack, and there are side quests that you can pick up along the way. We'll go into more detail with that just a little bit later. But I like the world of Spira. I like the way it's set up. I like its lore, and I like the various biomes that we go through and all of the nooks and crannies that we explore. I love the history of this world, and it does it really well by showing you that world of Spira in Final Fantasy X. Now, I touched on it briefly. We have no world map, and I was a little salty when I first played Final Fantasy X. I was like, where's my world map? Where's my airship where I can traverse the lands? And I had that discussion with myself when I was younger, and I was like, this isn't Final Fantasy. I'd played 7, 8, and 9. That's how I got into the series. So that's what I was used to. I was used to the overworld being kind of presented to me, and unlocking vehicles and traversing through chocobos, airship, boats, anything else and everything else in between. Final Fantasy X stripped that all away in, I guess, would be favor of storytelling. That might just be me. I can't really imagine Final Fantasy X with an overworld, But playing it again and again and just experiencing the story, like I said when I was talking about the history of Final Fantasy X, I don't think it needs an overworld. It does a very good job. And, you know, the airship system of going through all the things, entering coordinates and all of that just adds to it and makes Final Fantasy X what it is. Final Fantasy X has its fair share of dungeons, and you kind of experience these as you go along. You go through the caves of Mount Gazazet, you can go back through the deserts of Binnacle Island and really go through there. And speaking of Gazazet, man, that random encounter rate is pretty crazy. I got a few game overs there, and that's a few gripes that I have with the game, but I'll get into that in just a little bit later. But you know, dungeons is very present, but there is one thing that makes Final Fantasy X truly unique and makes it a truly tedious task to deal with, and that is the Cloister of Trials. Now, these are introduced quite easily to you, like, oh look, you just put a spear here, you put a sphere over here, and there you go. Oh, there's a red scorching sphere, pull it over there. Oh, you've unlocked a secret item. This is all well and done, but then you get to Macalania and you think, oh, this is a little bit confusing. And then you get to Bevel and you're thinking, what is going on here? And I'll tell you something, I thought I went this very confidently this time around when I was getting the Platinum Trophy, and I was like, I know what I need to do, I know what I need to put where, and I can get all those Destruction Sphere items, no problem. Yeah, it only took me till Kilika to get a guide out and see how I needed to do things. The Cloister of Trials are quite tedious, and they don't really need to be in there, but they are in there, and you can get some cool items, but it has a trophy requirement. I much rather would not them be in the game, but that's just me. But they do add to the game to a certain extent. Okay, let's talk about the combat of Final Fantasy X. And going back into Final Fantasy X, I love the combat of Final Fantasy X. That conditional battle system, just having the turn orders on the right side of the screen really gets the cogs turning in your mind, and I love the way that Final Fantasy X introduces its combat. It's quite simple. You get a new character, you have a cutscene in battle on how to kind of utilize that character's full potential. Of course, very early on, we're introduced to Wakka, and we have flying enemies, and it makes you know that, okay, if you want to hit these flying enemies, you want to have someone like Wakka, or as you go and kind of boost your stats, you can kind of get anyone to hit flying enemies, but it's quite embedded that, you know, Wakka is your guy. Oh, we have the Flans and the Elementals. Lulu is the girl you want to use for these battles because she is your Black Mage. Oh, we have a big enemy here, but we don't have anyone that has that piercing ability just yet. Use Yuna, use her summons. And then we get Auron, and it's like he can use the piercing ability as long as you've got it on a weapon. And it's just really, really nice, and how it always gets you thinking. There is never a normal battle that feels like a normal battle very early on. Again, I'm going to bring up Mount Gazazet, as this is quite the test of your knowledge of the battle system with the range of enemies you're going, and the fact that they, well, to me, felt like they really boosted up just quite a bit. But it puts you to the test. Who is best suited in what situation? And I love that. And as you kind of go through the game, you learn more and more. You unlock more nodes on the sphere grid, more abilities, and then you can really kind of customize your team to suit the battle that you're going into. I mentioned briefly equipment, and you unlock, I think when you get Riku, just thinking back, you get the ability to customize items and weapons and armor in particular, should I say. And the way this works is items that you've collected along the way, some weapons will always have up to 4 slots, and some of those slots might be empty. You use items to add abilities. So for example, for weapons, you can have a chance to maybe petrify, or have a high chance to petrify, or put poison, or put piercing on so you can pierce through the enemies with the harder defenses. or you can, you know, break the damage limit as you kind of go further and further in the game. And it's the same for armor. You can be poison proof. You can have a mana ward on you that will protect you from certain elementals, and you can go through and kind of really customize armor the way you want. And if you are planning on completing this game to 100% and getting that platinum trophy, customization is going to be key, and there are going to be some items that you really want to grind because there's some unbelievable abilities that you really want to take with you. For example, the triple overdrive, the overdrive to AP, the triple AP, the ribbon abilities. These are all abilities to strive for, especially if you're trying to hit that end game of Final Fantasy X. And this can be quite both tedious or quite, you know, rewarding in whatever way you look at it. You might get quite tired of doing it again and again, but at the same time, this weapon is really suited to what I need right now, and I'm going to just blitz through everything. And I really do like the customization settings in the weapons and armor, but once I had what I needed and I had my celestial weapons, again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, I was pretty much set and didn't need to touch that system again, but it's there and it's very customizable for any situation. We don't level up traditionally in Final Fantasy X. We gain sphere levels, and the way this works is we gain experience like we would do in past Final Fantasies, and then we throw the levels that we gain into this sphere grid. And there's two versions. I picked standard, and looking back on it and getting the max sphere grid trophy, I wish I stuck with expert. But you have standard and you have expert. Expert kind of allows you to kind of go wherever you want straight off the bat with your characters, so you can customize what you want each character to do. But the standard sphere grid is much more kind of akin to what the characters are offering at the beginning of the game. So Lulu's path will be strictly based on magic, and black magic in particular. Yuna, you're going to get that white magic and just stats to boost that. Tidus will be more based on like speed and fast abilities. Auron a lot more stronger and breaking either armor, magic, power, whatever it may be. They kind of have set routes, and Kimahri is just like, yo, I'll go wherever I need to. Kimahri, go where I want to go. And he's essentially your blue mage as well, which again, blue magic is in the game, and we'll talk about it right now. Let's segue into it. But Kimahri is your blue mage, and the way you get this is you simply use Lancer on select abilities and you get it. Again, I like any kind of blue mages, but I really feel like Kimahri is the weakest, and you can only use it, again, gated behind overdrives. And that's much more akin to what Cloister offered in Final Fantasy VIII. Really cool abilities, but only very limited in what their uses are. So let's go back over to the sphere grid, and I just want to add one more point, and it is a pain in the arse to fill out completely. Yes, there are various methods that you can use to get through this faster, but the fact that you need to kind of swap between what you need to do, and I did have like a method. So essentially you go into the Dontombre fight, you get all that AP, then you kind of go through the sphere grid with the 3 characters that you've used. There's more details to it, but I'm going to give you a brief overview, and then I go farm Kotos for the spheres that I need to fill out, and then rinse repeat. That was kind of the circle of life that I was doing when it came to the sphere grid. And again, this thing is huge, very, very tedious to fill out, but you know, it is what it is, and I was very, very happy once it was done. While speaking about Kimahri, I touched on overdrives, and I think overdrives are the best kind of limit break system, because this again has customization to it. So essentially, we have a bar that fills up as we get hit to start off with, and then we unlock the overdrive, and we can unlock various overdrives for each characters as we do certain things for the game. So Tidus's will kind of work as you kind of use them more, I think. Auron's you get by getting the Jex spheres, or some of them. Whacker's is to do with Blitzball. Obviously Kimahri's is by using Lancet, and then I think the others are just kind of on their own with what they have to offer. But essentially it works a lot like, straight off the bat, like a limit break system akin from Final Fantasy VII. As you get yourself into more situations in battle, whether you're on your own or your party members keep dying or you keep protecting yourselves, you'll unlock more kind of overdrive modes. So for example, there is one called Comrade, and this will be very beneficial when you're doing the sphere grid stuff. but essentially when your comrade gets hit, your overdrive bar goes up as opposed to something else. So if they take a heavy hit or they might die, that could potentially fill to the top. So there are a lot of overdrive modes in there. You probably won't use half of them, but there are a lot in there to kind of just, again, customize the battle experience to what fits you best. What's the best way that your overdrives can fill? What are the best weapons you can take to battle? What is the best turn order, or what ability shall I use this turn will be beneficial before the enemy gets their turn? Really like the overdrive system in Final Fantasy X. Side content. Final Fantasy X has so much side content, like it's incredible, and it kind of gets you to explore every avenue of the game, whether it's chocobo racing, whether it's going into secret dungeons to get weapons, whether it is to play Blitzball. There is so much here, and it's all optional. There are secret Aeons you can get. There are, of course, the celestial weapons you can get. You can go and just lose yourself and play Blitzball while Sin is running rampant across Spira. It is completely up to you what you want to do, but there is so much here, and it really tests your abilities in what you know about the game. Obviously, when I say that, I'm talking about the monster arena, going around and capturing 10 of each monster. So the owner of the monster arena can create these specific monsters, these harder monsters that you can fight against and get rarer items, and of course get yourself to Nemesis. There is so much here, and it does test your knowledge of the game. Some of it can be quite frustrating. I know that there's a certain chocobo game in Final Fantasy X that can be quite a pain to get through because you need to get less than 0.00 seconds. For some strange reason, I'm quite good at this minigame. I was really good at back in the day with it. I don't know if I'm just very lucky, but if there is any footage playing now, I actually got this on my second try for this playthrough. Even though I already had the trophy from a previous playthrough, I had to do it again to get the celestial weapons and get that kind of grind going. But, you know, there are some frustrating ones in there. I had more trouble with the Remium Temple races, where you had to get the 1 chest, and then get the 2 chests, and get the 3 chests, and then 4 chests, and still beat the other chocobo. There are a lot of things that are going to get you frustrated, like the butterflies in Macalania Forest. There is so much here, and there's so much to dive into. There is avoiding 200 lightning bolts, which, again, I'll probably go into a bit more detail when I'm talking about the trophies, but there's so much side content crammed into this game. It might not feel like, well, to me, it doesn't really feel like the side content offered from Final Fantasy IX if I was to relate something recent that I've played when it comes to Final Fantasy, but there is a lot crammed in here, and it's up to you if you want to tackle it all. You will become a master of Final Fantasy X if you do everything, but you still can have a good time without doing that side content. Now it is the time to talk about the music of Final Fantasy X, and this relates to what I was talking about when it came to the kind of time period that I played Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X's soundtrack is simply amazing. It's not my favorite, but it is definitely one I can just listen all the way through. And this time around, and I'll talk about it in a little bit detail when I talk about the HD version in particular, we had the option to pick from, especially on the, I think this is only on the PS4 version. I don't think you could do it on the PS3 version. You have the option to pick between the original and the arranged soundtrack. I went between the both here because there are some rearranged tracks that are really nice, but some of them that don't just quite hit the peak of the original. But then again, there are some that really kind of surpass the original soundtrack, and I was swapping and swapping between both versions of the soundtrack, but I do really think that the Final Fantasy X soundtrack is worth a listen. I played Final Fantasy X on the PlayStation 4, but of course it didn't come out on the PlayStation 4, so this must be some kind of enhanced version or HD port of the original Final Fantasy X, and indeed it is. Now, some differences. For the first time, I believe you guys that are overseas got the Dark Aeons because it was more of an international European exclusive, or on the Japanese side, I don't think people in North America got that. So in this version, you get that, and that is a task upon itself. Some really nice enhanced side content and challenges there. But what does this HD port bring to the table? Well, I touched on it very briefly, but the pre-rendered backgrounds are so sharp and crisp, especially when you go into these inns. It is the one thing I noticed. The textures of Final Fantasy X HD are really, really nice, and it is the best kind of way to experience the kind of graphical fidelity of Final Fantasy X, except the face models of Tidus and Yuna. I don't know what happened here. They had obviously gotten redone, and they may have lost the originals, but you compare the PS2 version to the PS4 version. I prefer the PS2 versions of Tidus and Yuna. Again, you have a option to pick between the soundtracks, either the original or the arranged. I think on the PC version, you got some boosters, and I'm very, very jealous that there are boosters on here that you can speed up like to insane amounts of speed. I really, really wish it was implemented in the PS4 version. This is the first Final Fantasy game throughout this kind of series that I've done where there was no boosters. There was no way of boosting, either kind of being God mode or just the speed would have been perfect. Like that would have been my God mode. But there's none of it here unless you play the PC version. Speaking of things I didn't really like, there is no option to skip the cutscenes. This is incredibly frustrating because Final Fantasy X does have that trait of like sometimes you can get quite far and you can hit a game over out of nowhere. If the odds are stacked against you, you're going to hit a game over. And this happened again on Mount Gazazet, and I had to keep doing the cutscenes as we're going along, and I think the Seymour boss fight was one of them that I kind of struggled with because I was trying to remember the tactics of that, but having to watch that cutscene at least 3 times wasted a lot of my time. So I really wish there was an option to skip the cutscenes. Apart from that, you know, this is a very strong port. You have the trophy support here, or the achievement support, and you have all the bells and whistles that are included in the original Final Fantasy X. So I've not really got major complaints of the Final Fantasy X HD port. It's just skipping the cutscenes. I really wish I could do that. So now we talk about the grinds, the trophy list of Final Fantasy X. And yes, this one definitely took a lot longer, and that was because in reality, it took longer to do. There was a lot more things to do, and without the use of any kind of boosters, I had to do this the old-fashioned way. Just grind. Obviously, you have your story-based trophies, and then you have trophies for the celestial weapons and playing Blitzball and unlocking Whacker's reels. All of those are pretty easy. I think the most problematic thing you're going to have is just time. It's time with these trophies, and in particular, it's the sphere grid. It is the sphere grid. It is the longest grind, and if you kind of leave like the Dark Aeons, Penance, Nemesis, and I guess the end of the game as well until you've done the sphere grid, all those trophies will follow quite easily. There are a few more missables in there, like collecting the Elbet primers. There are a few that you can miss when you're visiting home, but apart from that, you can find them anywhere. That sphere grid trophy, man, having that kind of roulette wheel, not a roulette wheel, but just that circle of life of doing Don Tombury and doing Kotos for the spheres, and then throwing them all around and going through all the sphere grid and then filling in all the spheres. Oh man, it was such a tedious task to do, but I plowed through. There are obviously ways you can get through this a little bit faster when it comes to the battle. You can cop out and use Yojimbo if you have the dollar to throw, but in reality, I didn't really have to resort to doing this at all. I think I may have just used it on Unalesca, and I definitely used it, and I'll put my hands up, I used it on Penance, and I'll tell you why. Quick story time here, because it's very frustrating now that I'm reliving this once again, and I don't lie to you guys. So essentially, I followed the usual tactic of going against Penance, destroying the arms, and then, you know, just kind of having that methodology to the battle. There was just one turn that I forgot to put back on auto life, and that was at the very end of the fight. I'd already been going on about 32 minutes strong, and I forgot auto life, absolutely wiped out, and I bit my tongue so hard that it didn't bleed, don't worry about that, but I was very frustrated, and I just got angry, frustrated, and I went in, grinded some gil, had about 3 mil gil, and I was like, you know what, I'm not taking any chances, I'm throwing 2 mil at Yojimbo, and then there we go, Penance was destroyed. But everything else did it quite naturally, and it was really fun. Dark Aeons I've defeated for the first time here, and it was really fun. Like, be able to get through Valifor, Ifrit, Shiva very easily. Bahamut was a little bit longer, it's a bit more management. Magus Sisters, obviously very unique in kind of eliminating them out the way. And then going against Yojimbo 5 times was just, was a task in itself. But then kind of doing Anima was a bit of a ball ache, if I'm remembering correctly. So yes, the trophy list is very manageable if you have the time and patience. That is the key to Final Fantasy X's Platinum. And there we have it, another Final Fantasy done. And, you know, this has been 10 Final Fantasies that I've done in the space of, what, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. 7 months I've done 10 Final Fantasy Platinums, and I think I've also done Crisis Core video, and there'll be another side game coming out very soon as well. So, all in all, the series is going strong. There is a certain game that will be approaching that will be quite difficult, and I'll talk about that when we get closer to the time. But I just want to thank you for all being here and listening to the journey I had with Final Fantasy X. If you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you're notified of my content. Get involved in the comment section below, because I would love to hear your experience with Final Fantasy X and if you got the Platinum. And I'm just going to end it by thank you for all watching, and I'll catch you on the flip side.